Good morning, you guys. Your boy Ben Mahari here, represent Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the basketball community. If you guys want more basketball content, tune in to Basketball Conversations every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball-related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. If you are new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. And if you want to donate any money to the value of this channel, I will post in the PayPal and Cash App link underneath the description box if you want to donate any money to the value of this channel. So, this is another episode of my morally historical perspective videos that I always love to do Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Central Time. And any topics or any players or any teams that you want me to discuss about, feel free to hit the comments section and I will respond to your request accordingly to when it was received. Okay. Today, we're going to discuss about one of the probably the greatest team in the history of the Minnesota Golden Gophers basketball team. Unfortunately, they've been erased from history for various reasons, and I will explain to that shortly. But we're going to discuss about the 1996-97 Minnesota Golden Gophers men's basketball team. Arguably, that was one of the probably the greatest Gophers team ever assembled. Okay. Now, a little bit background information about that team. This was basically Clem Haskins' 11th season in his career with the Golden Gophers. He was basically hired as the coach back in 1988. As basically, he was basically for plays basically coming from Western Kentucky. All right. Now, in the first two seasons when he was coaching the Gophers, he led the Gophers to the Elite Eight. I should say to the Sweet 16, where they lost against Duke in '89. And then in 1990, he led them to a Cinderella one to the Elite Eight when they ended up losing to Georgia Tech. All right. But heading into that 96-97 season, nobody predicted the kind of season that the Gophers were going to have. The previous year, they were one of the teams that was basically on the bubble of possibly making it to the NCAA tournament, but basically failed to get into the tournament. And a lot of the analysts at that time were surprised because they had picked up some key victories during that stretch that kind of gave them a good, solid case for them to get to the tournament. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So, heading into that 96-97 season, it was tournament or bust for this team, but no fan ever predicted what was going to take place at that 96-97 season. Okay. And to put this in proper perspective, I was about 5 years old, during that 96-97 season. Therefore, some of the memories might be a little bit bleak for me, but I still remember most of the broad information. Okay. But that year, the Gophers basically began the season on November 23rd. Okay. They started out their non-conference schedule going at least 11-1. Okay. By the time they started their Big Ten season in January the 2nd, they basically won their first 4 games against Big Ten competition. All right. And they pretty much finished out that regular season going 16-2 in the Big Ten and an overall 27-3 record as they won the Big Ten regular season championship. Okay. This was a team that basically played a lot of the similar small ball that was a little bit similar to the Illinois team that I discussed about last week. This was a team that was comprised of Quincy Lewis and John Thomas. Okay. Their starting backcourt was Bobby Jackson, who was a junior college transfer, and then Sam Jacobson, who was from Cottage Grove, Minnesota. All right. Those were the 2 starting backcourt players. Then you round it off with Courtney James as your center. You know what I'm saying? And then you also add Eric Harris coming off your bench. You got Trevor Winter coming off your bench. So this was a team that relied on their backcourt and relied on the depth of their bench. That was pretty much what this team relied upon the most. Okay. They were basically one of the few teams. This was one of the few times that the Gophers ever even made it to the top 5 in the nation. You know what I mean? Because during that period of time, the Gophers either were scratching the surface of the top 10 or didn't do much at all. And this was a team that pretty much was relied upon their backcourt. All right. Because Bobby Jackson was a 6'1", point guard, but played like a 6'6" guard. And Sam Jacobson was actually 6'4". But both of them guys averaged at least around 25 points per game combined between the two. Okay. And it was a team that pretty much would try to blitz you and try to push the pace against you. And when the starters, got into foul trouble or started to get to fatigue, they were resourceful of using their bench. So the key of that team was their bench and their guard play, as I said. Okay. So they were able to get the number one overall seed in the South Regional, and end up making it all the way to the Final Four. All right, as they blew out Southwest Texas State, Temple, and then they had to survive a classic game against Clemson in double overtime, in a game where both starting backcourt players combined for at least, I think it was at least 50 to 60 points between the two. I'm not sure about the actual stats on that particular one, but they end up, and then in the regional final, they beat UCLA, a team that was 2 years ago won the national championship and made it to their first ever Final Four in school history. Up until that point, they were scratching the surface of the Final Four, or they even make it at all. And I remember that year, it was pretty much a wild renaissance year, because the Timberwolves made the playoffs for the first time in franchise history, and then you had the Gophers, who made their first ever trip to the Final Four. It was really a fun time if you were a basketball fan in the state of Minnesota. I do remember those kind of days. You know what I mean? And there's been a lot of, bleak years. There's been a lot of, sad times or just heartbreaking moments in Minnesota. But those were one of the few times that it was actually really a lot of fun to see, Well, they made it to the Final Four, and they ended up losing to the defending national champions, Kentucky, that was just pretty much twice as better, especially with that Kentucky team with Wayne Turner, who was an All-American, and then also Ron Mercer, who was an All-American too. You got Scott Padgett, who was a stretch 4 player, and then also Anthony Epps, who was also a versatile ball player too, who could play the 2 guard and the point guard position. And then you had the center positions, either with Jamal McGlory or Nazir Muhammad playing those positions too. So that was a team that was just too much for the Gophers that day. And I remember that game in which the Gophers had 4 straight possessions where they had 4 turnovers, and they turned the ball over nonstop. In fact, I think that if the Gophers would have, cracked down on their turnovers and would have stopped letting their nerves show all over the place, I think they would have had a chance to beat Kentucky. But that's just easier to say, in hindsight. But that was it, man. It was the greatest season they've ever had in the history of their program. And Bobby Jackson won, Big Ten Player of the Year. He was Defensive Player of the Year. You know what I mean? Clem Haskins was also Coach of the Year of the Big Ten as well. And so it was really a fun time during that time. Unfortunately, the reason why they got erased in the record books is because of academic scandal that took place in 1999. Now, I'm going to explain to you guys about that academic scandal because there's a lot of people that don't know about it. You see, on March 10th of 1999, this was the day before the Gophers were scheduled to play in the first round of the NCAA tournament against Gonzaga. The St. Paul Pioneer Press reported that an officer manager of the university's academic counseling unit basically alleged that she completed hundreds of pieces of coursework for more than 20 players on the Gophers basketball team. And according to the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and the report is named by George Dolman, okay, the two players who were part of that 97 team were Courtney James and Bobby Jackson. All right. And basically this academic counselor or whatever basically provided the reporter with printed samples of coursework basically written by her and basically turned in by the students. All right. And other allegation is that she was allowed to continue assistant players despite being caught in 96 basically doing a take-home exam with a player. And basically an assistant coach even drove down to the person's home and basically providing tutor sessions in possible violation of NCAA rules during that time. And she even also admitted that she basically duplicated the same coursework for different student athletes to turn it in different classes. And what's even worse, the coach basically paid the academic office manager cash to help tutor the players. So immediately when the story came out, the Gophers, began an investigation, okay? And they suspended 4 players, which included 2 starters of their team, and before the game actually began. It's basically alleging that those players had basically had coursework done for them and ended up losing the game anyway. But it continues to get worse. It actually continues to get worse because 2 more people also came forward that pretty much said that they done coursework for those Minnesota basketball players. All right. And then on March 24th of 99, basically these other persons basically said that the starting power forward, Courtney James in 95, basically told Haskins that she would never do student athletes assignments ever again. And basically, she's told the academic counselor that the player needed actually help. Courtney James to a certain extent. So after almost a full year, when the investigation came to its conclusion, here's what the NCAA found. They found that the academic office manager prepared nearly 400 pieces of coursework for at least 18 basketball players. And the academic counselor, who was a separate person, basically orchestrated academic fraud. And the head coach, Clem Askins, knew of the fraudulent activities and probably provided benefits to both of those two people that was basically helping them pass their classes. All right. In addition to that, in 86, the academic council quoted Atkins in a memo saying, if someone's doing a paper for a student athlete will allow him the opportunity to be eligible to compete, therefore succeed, we need to do the paper for him. All right. Lastly, the academic counselor and along all other players of the basketball, along with other staff members of the basketball team, basically intimidated professors and registered staff to change the grades for student athletes to maintain eligibility here. Okay. And this was way worse than that, because it turned out that there were other rule violations that happened on the football team and on the men's hockey team at the same time. So it was pretty much all over the board. Now, as most of you guys already know, I've always been on the NCAA's case on various occasions when it comes to basically on the issue of paying athletes, and basically letting the athletes make money off of themselves. All right. That I've been on the case for. But when it comes down to academic fraud and basically fixing grades to let a player go out there and compete in NCAA competition, that's where I go against that, because what you're basically saying is that you're basically wanting to cheat your coursework, and you're basically cheating yourself the opportunity to learn how to be to be a decent person and learn how to earn a degree outside of your sport. And so I felt that re-looking into that information, it was really a bad move on their part, but not as worse as it came down with this. So after the investigation completed, the Gophers basically imposed, basically stiff penalties on themselves: a postseason ban for the 99-2000 season, a reduction of 3 scholarships for basically that year, and a total of 4 scholarships reduced for both the next 3 years. Okay. The forfeiting 90% of the money earned from their appearances in both 94, 95, and specifically the 97, season. Then after that, the Gophers basically bought out the last of the $1.5 million contract of Clem Haskins. All right. And then it got worse from there, because then the NCAA imposed their penalties: 4 years of probation up until 2004, a reduction of 5 scholarships up until that year, a reduction of 6 paid visits by the recruits until 2003, and basically vacating all their tournament appearances, including their 96 and 98 NIT championships, okay, which also includes vacating that entire 97 team. And then also a show cause penalties to basically for both Clem Haskins and another person, okay? Therefore, what a show cause penalty is basically that you're basically the NCAA institutes a penalty that you basically lied about, your involvement and tried to cover it up. And basically you have to serve a 7-year no show clause penalty. You know what I'm saying? And so it was pretty much a really, really huge mess. And pretty much it would erase the entire history of the team. Now today, they're still holding some celebrations. When I was in college at the U of M, they did hold a 15-year anniversary of that team. You know what I mean? Because there's still people that felt that still celebrate that team. Now, when I was studying journalism at the time, I talked to some professors who were covering the story at the time. They all concluded that team should not be celebrated because they basically cheated and basically committed academic fraud by doing the things that they did. And to that, I understand to a certain extent. But there's a lot of different things that the NCAA has done over the years that just makes you want to shake their head. And so that's just my 2 cents on the whole thing. But unfortunately, not many people know much about this team. You know what I mean? The memories that they provided. You know what I mean? It was an entertaining time, in Williams Arena. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, we have never reached anywhere close to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, or even Final Four since that year. It was basically one magical year, and then after that, nothing but mediocrity ever since. And so hopefully someday down the line that the Gophers can reach back to that level once again. But that scandal still rocks the university to this day, even through all of the other stuff that's been gone through, and specifically involving with the football program in terms of the rape allegation thing back in, at least it was 2015, 2016, as I remembered. And so it was a rough period for the Gophers athletic program. And I will say that they do their decent job, getting down to the bottom of a lot of the stuff that goes down. But, you guys you figure out a way to get your programs, to get people to come over to, to the U. But, I've seen great players like the Jones brothers. They went on to Duke. You know what I mean? They never even looked at going to the U of M. And that's a sad thing because, if the program was on a straight path and had a direction of where they wanted to go, I bet you a lot of those Minnesota recruits would love to stay home and play with the Gophers. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But I just want to give you guys a perspective about that team and how great that team was at that time and how magical that season was for a lot of Gopher fans, and including for me, seeing that team reach the Final Four. That's something that's never been done before and has never been done since. And so it was great. It was a great memories, seeing Williams Arena, fill up to capacity, and the student section always going nuts every single game on a Friday and a Saturday. So, that's just my viewpoints though, man. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Let me know what you all thought about that team, specifically in that 97 season. And then I'll continue to put more videos up on the day.